All right. Well, I guess we have a small, mighty audience. So we can dive in. I will work through the presentation here, but since it is a small group, I think it would be okay to interrupt throughout and ask questions if anything comes up. I'm Jason Zimbler. I'm a project manager in the Clean Transportation Group at NYSERDA. And we cover in our group a host of tactics and strategies and policy interventions that all are in service of reducing the carbon from the transportation sector. Transportation sector is the largest culprit in terms of GHG emissions in New York. And you can see there how that mix is comes to be 25% from light duty vehicles, 7% from medium and heavy duty vehicles, 8% from all other sources such as marine, air, and things like that, off-road sources. So decarbonizing the transportation sector is pretty critical to achieving New York's climate reduction and decarbonization goals. What are we working on in the transportation group? Well, we're sort of approaching this in a number of ways. My portfolio is very EV centric, so I'll be giving you certainly that view of it. But in our group, we also tackle things like making the transportation system more efficient, encouraging people to use more shared modes of travel, trying to change the time of travel to make the system more efficient, encouraging reductions in vehicle miles traveled. So there's a host of strategies that are outside of just electrification, which is a really important main strategy, but we pursue other strategies as well. Within the electrification portfolio, we're focused on getting more people, getting the vehicle fleet in New York to go electric, getting enough charging stations in the ground, reducing the barriers to getting charging stations built, and I'll focus on that a fair amount today. And so we have about 95,000, about 100,000 vehicles that are electric, some form of electric. Not all of them are all electric. Some are plug-in hybrids, but some part of their propulsion is handled by an electric motor. That's about 100,000 vehicles. And the target right now that we have is about 8 to 10% of the vehicle fleet in New York by 2025, which roughly corresponds to 850,000 vehicles. There is now a law in the state which matches California's nation-leading law that all new light-duty sales need to be zero emission by 2035 and medium and heavy-duty sales by 2050. And the regulatory mechanisms are coming into force now to make those enforceable. On the charging station side, we have the goal of we had a goal of 10,000 by 2021. We sort of just underneath it. There are more than the 7,000 that you see there because there are some that are non-public, that may be workplace chargers that don't technically show up on maps or in counts, but they exist and they represent additional charging resources for New Yorkers. So we have 7,000 today, a mix of level 2 chargers and fast chargers. And the goal is to have 10 large plazas of fast chargers, DC fast chargers in each region by the end of this year. As I talked about before, transportation is a big portion of the New York State greenhouse gas accounting. And the goal is to reduce GHG 40% by the end of the decade, 85% by 2050. Why is the EV a right choice? Why is an electric vehicle the one to choose? I'll spend I'll try to go through this quickly because I think some of the core information that is going to be of use to this audience has to do with helping local governments, municipalities, AHJs to facilitate EV adoption and facilitate charging station implementation. But just to help set the context for the industry and they sort of make the case for electric vehicles, sort of 4 main pillars here. They're super fun to drive. They have fantastic acceleration, instant torque, nothing like a a combustion engine that needs gears to get up to its full potential. They're technology rich. You can control vehicle systems through smartphones. They're much quieter and cleaner than combustion engines from a CO2 standpoint, as well as other particulate matter that contributes to local air quality, particulate matter, volatile organic compounds, NOx, SOx, things like that. They're getting cleaner all the time because the generation mix is increasingly sourced by renewables. They're quiet, they're smooth, they're easier to maintain, many fewer parts, about 1/10 of as many moving parts as a combustion engine. The fuel costs are lower. Certainly we're seeing that right now with conflict in Europe. And then, there's incentives that don't necessarily exist for combustion cars. There's federal tax credits, New York State incentives, things like that. It is markedly cleaner to use an EV in most places around the country. 94% of people in the US live where driving an EV produces less emission than a 50 mile per gallon gasoline car. So that means that the source of the electricity in those places for 94% of people means that you're going to produce less emissions with an EV than the most efficient gasoline car. So you're ahead of the game. And in some places like upstate New York, which has a lot of hydro, your equivalent miles per gallon is 231. It's staggeringly high. I think it probably I'll do a minute here because these things are generally I think understood by a lot of people who are in the conversation about EVs already, but to just sort of make sure we're level setting, there are different grades of electrification. A combustion car would be the left side, where it's only powered by a gasoline engine. The second from the left would be like a Toyota Prius, where there's an electric motor, but it only is serving to be a range extender or an MPG enhancer to improve your efficiency. You're not actually powering any of the motoring or the propulsion with that electric motor, or very, very, very little. And then you're not actually fueling that conventional hybrid with any electricity. If you move to the third column from the left, that's a plug-in hybrid. There are 2 drivetrains. You do plug in, you both charge this car with electricity from the grid, and you put gasoline in it. The electric motor can handle about 20 to 40 miles worth of all electric travel, and then it hands over to the gasoline engine. So you're getting quite a bit of, so your day trips or your local driving, your use cases there can be covered by electricity if you keep the battery charged. And then you have long range capability from the gasoline engine. And then on the far right, there's no gasoline powertrain in that vehicle. And it's only powered by electricity, and it's only fueled by electricity. Any questions so far? All right. So where are we in our journey towards full electrification? These targets have existed for a little while, but I think we're in the process of revising them and trying to reflect newer market developments and this acceleration of EVs and how we're going to sort of expand the ambition of our targets. But right now, the roadmap is to have 2 million EVs on the road by 2030. And I think that that number probably needs to come up to 3 or 4 million to be on track to meet our 2035 all ZEV sales legislative target. Right now, there are about, like I said before, 100,000 EVs on the road, and Long Island downstate certainly has over-indexed relative to upstate. Long Island's the region with the largest EV penetration right now, and the largest both in quantity and share of the vehicles on the road. And other regions are starting to catch up in terms of their relative share. The availability of electric vehicles has been tremendously positive. The last few years has been a lot of excellent progress with increasing the number of available EVs on the market in dealer showrooms. Our Drive Clean rebate, which is the New York State incentive program, has folded in more and more models and made more and more models available for incentives each year. And the chart on the right from the auto industry shows the growing list of both battery electric vehicles, BEV, and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, PHEV, on the right. Hopefully this presentation can be a resource for those who need it and who are interested in some of this information. So I've provided some links here to some very good public resources, some other third parties, NGOs, or government resources for how to understand the EV market better and to understand where to find a vehicle, how to answer some questions about vehicles and whatnot. So take advantage of that. In terms of EV programs and incentives that exist right now in New York and federally, for light duty vehicles, which is anything under 8 or 10,000 pounds, there is the New York Drive Clean rebate. That is a on the hood incentive. It reduces the cost at the point of purchase. The vehicle is cheaper to the consumer. The dealer reduces the cost at purchase and then comes to NYSERDA for a reimbursement of that incentive. The amount of the incentive depends on the battery range and the electric range of the vehicle. That's up to $2,000. And about 100 million has been committed to that program, of which about 80 million has already been expended. The federal EV tax credit exists for certain models. There was a provision when it was written that capped the number of credits that could be given to each automaker at 200,000. So once an automaker sold more than 200,000, it lost the ability to provide the credit, or technically it stepped down, but then eventually phased out. And so for automakers that still have access to that credit, Ford, Honda, Toyota, Hyundai, you can capture an additional $75,000, $7,500 off the price of the vehicle if you have the tax burden. If you have an EV in New York, you can also register for a clean pass through New York State DOT, and you'd get some HOV lane access in certain parts of the state, toll discounts in certain parts of the state, Port Authority, so things like that. And on the medium and heavy duty side, there are incentives through the New York Truck Voucher Incentive Program that buy down the incremental cost of purchasing an electric vehicle relative to its diesel or fossil fuel counterpart. So there's often a cost delta there, a cost premium for the electric version of that truck or bus, and the voucher incentive program closes that gap. I'm sorry. So the Drive Clean rebate I just mentioned, over 60,000 rebates have already gone out the door. That I had mentioned about 90,000 vehicles on the road, so a good portion of them have taken advantage of the Drive Clean rebate. About 11 million in additional remaining funding, and after that goes away, the program will be adapted and probably have a income qualification associated with it. So the goal is to encourage more of low and moderate income participation in the rebate, and to help low and moderate income populations cover the cost of the incremental cost of electric vehicles and help them to achieve some of the benefits of EVs. On the charging station side, EVSE, that's Electric Vehicle Supply Equipment, or an acronym for charging stations. There's a different set of standards and a different set of plugs and power levels that exist in the market right now. And some of that is consolidating, but some of it will remain. segregated by power, even if some of the ports and connectors consolidate. The three main sort of the distinction is across these three levels: AC1, AC level 2, and DC power, which is sometimes referred to as level 3. The kilowatts for each of those levels is about 1 kilowatt. That's for power that you'd get from your standard wall outlet in a home or in a business. That's 110, 120 volts, 10 amps, 1 kilowatt. Level 2 is what in a home would be a clothing dryer outlet. And that's 240 volts with anywhere between 30 and 80 amps. And that could be anywhere from 7 to 20 kilowatts. And that charges a vehicle much faster than AC level 1, but still requires many hours for a vehicle that has a large battery capacity to fill up. And then you get to fast chargers, which resemble gas station levels of speed of charging, but we're not quite there yet because of a gas station has an equivalent of something like 2 or 3 megawatts of power if you were to convert. But a fast charger is based on the amount of amps and volts at that particular grid point, and so there's a varying level of kilowatts. Could be as low as 50 for a fast charger, could be as high as 350, or in the future we'll probably even see higher kilowatts, maybe a megawatt of power. And then it depends on if the vehicle can take it, but if the higher, the better the vehicles, the more advanced vehicles on the road right now can take about 200, 150 and up kilowatts. And that means you'd fill your battery in 20 to 30 minutes. Any questions? I mentioned consolidation. There are different connector types for fast chargers. CHAdeMO was a standard that had been developed and advanced by the Asian automakers, and they have sort of abandoned their support for it. So now most automakers, aside from Tesla, have moved to and consolidated around the CCS standard. So that's basically everybody now. And it's possible too that we'll start to see consolidation between Tesla and the remainder of the market soon. I think that's sort of in the wings. Charging stations have a similar kind of story to the vehicles. We've seen good progress, but we need to see a whole lot more. So the hockey stick really hasn't even happened yet, but the next 2 or 3 years are going to see a flurry of activity, getting us to 50,000 plugs by 2025, and we'll probably need 200,000 or 300,000 plugs by the end of the decade. And then, so here's a kind of inventory of the programs that exist in New York State right now. On the public charger side, we have the Charge Ready program, which was for level 2 chargers that actually had its funding exhausted, and we anticipate the relaunch of that program later this year, with a focus specifically on multi-unit dwellings and workplace charging. There is a fast charge incentive as well for $11 million that comes from Volkswagen settlement funds, and that provides capital incentives to cover 80% of the purchase and installation for fast chargers. Those are the highest level, the fastest chargers I was describing previously, and those are very expensive, $100,000 per port. Other programs, there is a utility make ready program that provides funding from the utilities for the infrastructure that leads up to the plug. So that's upgrades to the system, upgrades to the grid, trenching, cables, meters, panels, like everything that gets you right up to the dispenser or the charging station. That's covered by a utility program called the Make Ready program. NYPA, the New York Power Authority, is investing a lot of money in building fast chargers around the state through a program called Evolve New York. And there is a tax credit for non-residential EV chargers through New York State Taxation and Finance. what we know is coming is a big investment in fast chargers on highway corridors, thanks to the federal bipartisan infrastructure law, or otherwise known as the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. There's a formula program that has $5 billion and about 200 million is coming to New York from that program, and that will result in a lot of charging stations on or near highway exits. There is also a program that is right now closed, but will open again, from the Department of Environmental Conservation for municipal charging infrastructure funding, as well as funding for municipal vehicles, municipal electric vehicles. So in NYSERDA, we have sort of the mission of trying to accelerate the transportation decarbonization as quickly as possible. And so I'll give you a kind of preview of some of the work that we're approaching and thinking about and working on as we try to reduce barriers in the market. On the vehicle side, we know that incentives are important and have been influential to getting people to go electric. And that is, we're going to continue to do that and make sure that those incentives are tuned to where the market need is greatest, whether that's driven by income or whether it's driven by air quality and disadvantaged community designations. We're going to make sure that those incentives are regularly tuned to the areas of greatest need. We know that consumer engagement and dealer engagement is really important to help answer questions and reduce the lack of information that exists in the market about electrification. And so we have future outreach programs, workplace charging programs that are going to address that. On the charging station side, that's an area where NYSERDA can do a little more, and the state can actually be a little more of a lever or more of an influence to helping prepare the market for electrification. And so that is, building more stations first and foremost, making sure those stations are in the right places, that they're accessible to the public, and that site hosts or owners of charging stations have a pathway to a reasonable return on owning and operating those stations. Some of that is just helping with the initial cost. Some of it is helping with the operations expense, the OpEx. And the regulator in New York, the Public Service Commission, is helping to address tariffs and rates that have not necessarily been developed for EV charging, that were developed for other technologies, and have made it difficult for EV charging hosts to have a reasonable return on owning that equipment. So there's some good work that's happening to reform EV tariffs now this year. And NYSERDA is helping to support that effort. We know that the charging can't, it is suboptimal if it's happening without regard for when the grid is best able to support EV charging. If a driver plugs in as soon as they come home after a work day, that is a peak electricity time, and it would be sort of more optimal for that vehicle to take its charge when the early evening load starts to taper off as people go to sleep, or as much of the population goes to sleep. So managed charging is a kind of set of programs or set of principles that help to flatten or blend the charging activity that needs to happen for vehicles into areas of the day that are that sort of fill gaps between peaks in usage, electricity usage. Charging solutions for apartment dwellers. This is a challenge. Many of the early adopters of vehicles have a dedicated place to park and a dedicated place to plug in. And when you don't have that, there's less confidence about buying an EV. You're more reliant on public charging. So people who rent and people who live in apartments are garage orphans, as it's sometimes called, and so better solutions for apartment dwellers, better, more public charging, of course, is one of the solutions, but better access to charging at apartments as well. Interoperability among charging stations, something that we're very focused on, making sure that various hardware manufacturers produce hardware that can be used by any driver. Drivers who have subscriptions with different networks are able to transact on stations that are connected to other networks, ensuring that it's a pretty seamless experience. You shouldn't have to worry about whether Exxon or Mobil is a different company. You should just be able to transact the same way. The way you do it with a gasoline car, you should be able to do that with a charging station. Siting, of course, is really important, helping EV site hosts or potential EV site hosts to understand the business case, some of the costs and the revenues that are the potential for costs and revenues, especially for fast charging, which is a very expensive proposition. We can help to try to support the market and its development there. And then also working with Department of State, with local governments to help develop and revise and harmonize building codes to encourage more EV charging to be required and to reduce barriers for owners, for apartment owners, commercial owners to install EV charging.
Hey, Jason, can I jump in with a question real quick?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I just going back one slide. I just had a question about some of the charging station programs. Do you want to? Yeah. Oh, is that good to handle now? Okay. With the DCFC incentive, is that? I think I remember seeing some activity around that here. Is that opportunity now closed? Like the money's kind of in the process of being committed to that one?
We ran 2 rounds of that solicitation for that fast charge incentive, and we've made awards, but not made a public announcement yet about those awards. So about 60-70% of that money was committed in the first 2 rounds. So there's another round forthcoming.
Okay.
We expect to run that round in the spring or early summer. So keep an eye out for that. There's definitely more money that's coming to the street, and the activity from the first 2 rounds will start to make some noise later this year.
That's great. I appreciate that info. And then I know a few communities here in Chautauqua County have taken advantage of the DEC's municipal charging program, or the ZEV rebate. Do you, I know you are with NYSERDA, not the DEC, but do you know kind of when that funding opportunity will open back up? Is that, I assume, in the next month or 2?
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't had a catch up with them in the last few weeks, so I haven't heard the latest on what their plans are for their next tranche of funding.
Got it.
I know they have a pause in between each of their rounds.
Okay.
So I don't know when they anticipate reopening that.
Okay, that's good to know. And one more here. I know there's been interest in kind of seeing what the infrastructure law EV rollout is going to look like. Do you have any sense at this point kind of how that funding might be dispersed in New York, or is that still to be worked out?
Yeah, a plan hasn't been submitted to the federal government yet. That's actually something that I'm working on with New York State DOT right now. But NYSERDA will likely be the public entity in New York that administers the programs that come from at least the first block of money. The requirement of the formula program, there are 2 big charging station programs that came from the law. There was a formula program that required corridor charging on the nation's corridors, nation's highways and key corridors, and then another That was $5 billion that went to the states based on their population. And then the other $2.5 billion program was discretionary, which allows for chargers in fast chargers in communities, on public roads. We know less about that because the federal government has been setting up the parameters for the formula program first. So what we know is that we have to build these chargers within a mile of one travel mile of these key corridors, and they have to be spaced at least no more than 50 miles apart. They have to be a plaza of 4 fast chargers with at least 150 kilowatts of power per charger. And before the formula money can be used for anything else, that build out has to be completed and signed off by the federal government. So we have some work ahead of us to get, and we anticipate that for kind of rough math, we think that that's probably about 70 locations in New York, that new locations that will have to come online with new development of new chargers in order to get us to that point of completion per their requirements. And then once that happens, we can use additional money or remaining money from the formula program to tackle charging gaps in other places. Because by no means will we have enough chargers in the state, even when we finish that 50-mile separation.
That's great. I appreciate that background. Thank you.
Sure. And also by the end of the year, we should know more about the discretionary program, which should allow for some parallel activity to run competitive solicitations for chargers, for communities, for tribal lands, for fleet electrification, things like that. So lots more to learn, and we're keeping our eyes open to see what that's going to be. So we've tried to play a role as to the extent possible as a kind of disseminator of information that can help municipalities and local government to reduce soft costs and reduce barriers to EV charging. It's one of the things that can be really influential in getting a project done quicker and cheaper. And so we've worked with partners, worked with consultants to do surveys, to do info gathering, to socialize results, to get gather best practices, and to the extent possible try to evangelize about this and try to help AHJs to improve the business case, or improve the conditions for doing business for charging station developers in their territories. And this is really important, and it's going to continue to be something that we do. We've done some of this in a passive way. We've put resources on our website. We hope to do more active work with some ongoing outreach or concierge type services for local governments who are interested in making some of these changes, and we could have a team that helps consult with them, helps guide them with materials, helps with some kind of work, providing some person power. But in terms of what we already know, I mean, it's not a secret. It's not secret sauce. It's just some basics that make sense, and sort of the solar industry has already been through this a decade ago in terms of how to make it easier to put these technologies, to get these technologies permitted and into the ground. Expedited permitting processes are really important, establishing timelines to give certainty to the market and to commit everybody to a specific set of timeline for review, allowing for concurrent reviews with other types of permits that are being applied for, allowing for permits as accessory use, allowing for permitting as accessory use, approval as noted is important to move things along. Establishing parking requirements, not saying that a charging station that goes in would lose a parking space. Allowing online submission to happen to facilitate an efficient process. And those are some of the things that we've done to try to help code officials prepare for what we know is going to be a big influx of requests for building charging stations in their areas. We have some guidebooks. The DC Fast Charger Guidebook has some excellent materials in it, some sample permits, checklists, model ordinances, things like that, that can be of great help. That's on our site. All of those pictures on the right are snapshots from materials that are on our site. So happy to, sort of field questions there, provide you links to resources and help however we can to try to improve that. So with that, I'll leave you with some links. I think I'm pretty sure the spreadsheet or the PowerPoint will get sent around, and happy to take any questions.
Well, thank you very much, Jason, for presenting this. I appreciate it, and your presentation is already posted on our website, and I will put the video up also.
Great, thank you.
I guess if Matt doesn't have any more questions, we can end the webinar.
I don't. I can, if I do have additional questions, I can reach out to Jason directly. I appreciate it, Jason. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
My email is on the in the slide deck.
All right. Well, goodbye, everybody, and thanks again, Jason.
Thank you. Take care.
You as well.